Hello, everyone, and welcome to the iSpring Solutions webinar series, where every week we talk about e-learning trends, share iSpring tips and tricks, and cover clients' cases. My name is Paulina. I am the community manager at iSpring, and I will be the moderator for today's webinar, where we will be talking about how to leverage rapid e-learning during social distancing. And to cover this topic, I have invited the presenter who have already done webinars for you guys, and it seemed like you like it a lot. Everybody, please meet Tarun Johnson. Hi, Tarun. How are you doing
Hey,
today?
pretty good, Paulina. How about yourself?
I'm doing great and actually very excited. All right,
Happy to
so
share.
before I pass the mic, of course, over to Tarun, I would like to go over a couple of tech moments. So, first of all, guys, if you need to run to another online meeting, of course, or if for some reason you will not be able to sit through the whole session, don't worry, because it's being recorded and I will send a link to it sometime after the webinar. And I still would like to encourage you to stay till the very end of it because it's a great opportunity to address your questions directly to our today's presenter. And to do so, please submit them in the question box, which you will find on the right side of the GoToWebinar panel. And we are going to have a Q&A session at the end, so please keep those questions coming. We will definitely try to take care of them as soon as we can. And also, I would like to mention that at the end of the webinar, you will be offered to take a short survey about how you liked this session. Please do so to provide us with feedback, which will definitely help us to deliver better content to you in the future. Okay, I think at this point we are more than ready to begin. So, Tarun, I am happy to pass the mic over to you, as well as the presenter rights, of course.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Paulina, for that introduction. And thank you, everybody, for being here today. So, welcome, everybody, to today's session on leveraging rapid e-learning during social distancing and the new times that all of us are living in and I'm sure struggling with in some form. So before we jump in, I just want to say, from CommLab and from iSpring, we really hope all of you are doing well. I know this time is a little challenging, and things have changed in how we work, and some people have sort of had their responsibilities reduced at work, so things like that are happening. So just staying aware of all that, we really extend our wishes to you, and just try to get through the worst of this situation, and then we'll come out the other side stronger and better prepared for the challenges that tomorrow is going to throw our way. So that is the perspective that I'm going in with, and I guess together we can sort of position ourselves as better educators, better trainers, and just better business people by the end of this whole struggle that we're going through. So a little bit about me before we go in, and not a lot. So my name is Tyrone Johnson. I work for CommLab India. I'm based out of Toronto, Canada, and I look after the our market in the US and Canada for CommLab. So I come from a background of, I would say, consulting in the US. And although it says I specialize and then I list 6 or 7 verticals, so it's not really a specialization, but then I do gravitate towards verticals that are more technical, which have products, manufacturing, things like that are my forte, and they tie into my background. So that's about my experience. And I personally like to work with my clients really closely in a consultative fashion, and supported with all my colleagues at CommLab, we really put together strong and robust training programs that really drive efficiency, performance, and business results for our clients. A couple of points about the company that I work for. So CommLab, we've been in the industry for 20 years now. I think we started in 2000. So on our current client list, we have over 100 global customers. So we do serve a global footprint of customers that come to us from different verticals. We're not tied down to any one vertical, but we serve different verticals and across different training topics and departments as well. We have 3 main services. I would say that classroom to e-learning being the primary one, and given the situation with COVID, we are seeing quite an uptick in the demand for this service, just converting classroom training to e-learning and other virtual training formats, of course. Also, we do a lot of, I would say, legacy to HTML5 course conversions. Again, this ties into the fact that Adobe is sort of phasing Flash out in 2020. So it's not going to work in your browsers post 2020. So we are helping a lot of our customers, rebuild their old content and redo it with HTML5 compatibility. So it's still going to work after 2020, and all that training content can be reused. We also help our clients with a lot of e-learning translation, since most of them are global companies with global workforces. We have been featured on e-learning industry from 2017, where we had the top 7th spot, I think, globally. And then through the years, we've really tried to deliver on customer experience, customer results, which has brought us to the top this year for the rapid e-learning category. And overall, we are at the silver position in e-learning content providers worldwide. So again, now let's start getting into the meat of our discussion for today. So everything that we are going to cover, we're going to talk about, is from the rapid e-learning perspective. So before we actually jump into the specifics of that, we will take a few minutes talking about what rapid actually means. All of us may have different perceptions of what that means. Most of them may be correct, but some of them may be a little, I wouldn't say wrong, but it's up to our interpretation. So we're just going to focus on what that meaning actually is before we dive into the specifics of how it applies to classroom, HTML5, and translations. All right. So this is our first poll question. Again, I'm going to ask Paulina to help me administer this poll. And the question is, rapid e-learning means, and then we have 4 options for you to choose from. So go ahead and then choose the option that most corresponds with what your understanding is.
So far, the most popular one is designing and developing e-learning courses real fast.
Okay, and what's that second place?
It's converting PowerPoint into e-learning using an authoring tool.
Wonderful. I think most of you are on the mark with the definition, although I think there is some nuance to these options as well. So that's what we are going to go into. Thank you, Paulina, for administering the poll. We can now close it out and go back to the PowerPoint.
All right, would you like me to share the results really quickly?
Yes, please.
Here they are. Here they are on the screen. And I will hide them and pass the mic back to you, Tarun.
Right. Great. Thank you so much, Paulina. Again, I think most of us are on the mark. We do have a good understanding or a decent understanding of what rapid means, at least to us. Let's dive into that definition a little bit and ensure that we are all on the same page before we look at these specifics. All right. So rapid e-learning. So before jumping into that, let's actually see why this has come into the picture now. So every one of us is in some way affected by the current global pandemic that's going on. So this has given rise to 3 main factors that I would say have accelerated the demand for rapid. The first one, I think all of us know this, is that quarantine has made most of us stay at home, and our work has also sort of changed. So many companies, many customers, including ourselves, are now looking at upskilling our workers during this time, keeping them at the forefront of their industries by training, relevant training. So that is something that has contributed. We are also seeing that a lot of training budgets across our clients and maybe across the industry in general are being sort of reduced or looked at more conservatively. So people are not going for really big budget outlays for really fancy courses and things like that. They're really looking to see what is the most quick and dirty way that we can develop something that still works, right? But still does not put a big dent in your organization's budget. So that is what companies are sort of converging on in these times. So that gives rise to what exactly rapid e-learning means. So in our parlance, in our experience, rapid e-learning means a few things, right? So it is the fact that these e-learning courses should be developed quickly and economically. I think that is sort of a universal definition that we, as partners who create a lot of rapid e-learning, would agree 100% with. And when you're talking about rapid e-learning, we're not really looking to build courses from the ground up using native coding. So we are looking towards authoring tools to help us out to really accelerate that time to course development, get that course quickly, in front of your audience. So tools like iSpring, I think, are perfect for this need, as they allow us to look at our content, get it in, put it in the right presentation patterns with all the right interactivities, and then quickly publish it out. So things like that is what we should consider during this day and age when rapid e-learning is on everybody's mind. It's also imperative that you look at the content that you're using as your input. So if your input content is usually in PowerPoint format, it's usually more easier to do rapid e-learning because you don't have to restructure that a lot. A PowerPoint deck usually has things in the right flow and the right quantity per slide. So it really minimizes the additional work that you would need to do during your course development stage. There is a misconception, I think, among a lot of people that rapid e-learning, for some reason, does not have instructional design, and that is patently false. So rapid e-learning does have instructional design, but when you think of instructional design, we really think of it as more functional rather than focusing on the overly visual bells and whistles aspect of it that some people may misconstrue it during our time. So we really focus on learning effectiveness, what makes sense for the learner, what makes sense for the content, and then drive that learning objective through the course. At the end of the day, it is something that if you do points 1 through 4 well, you will end up with an e-learning course that is more effective and efficient than I would say a traditional e-learning course would be, whether that is just through streamlining the content or the duration or just getting to the point quicker at the end of the day. So let's look into why or how this is a little different from what traditional e-learning actually is. A lot of us, I think, would be familiar with the concept of Occam's Razor. So again, Occam's Razor is a concept that talks about simplicity trumping everything else. So precedence is given to simplicity. So if a certain phenomenon has two competing theories, we would sort of gravitate towards the theory that is more simple, that is a more simple explanation of why something has happened. So entities are not to be multiplied beyond necessity or beyond what is necessary. It is basically looking at what do I need to put in my course to make it functional, to make it useful, and not really go much beyond that. So we're not really saying make it look bad. I'm just saying that you need to put the function before the form and ensure that this is what goes on for all your e-learning courses. So just putting the horse before the cart and not the other way around. Looking at the utilitarian aspect of all your courses. All right, so I'm going to dwell on this slide for a second here just to help you absorb before we move on to our next section here. Again, keeping courses simple, staying really true to your learning objectives, ensuring your assessments in the course tie into those learning objectives, and the content basically takes your learners from where they were before the course to where they need to get to after the course to achieve that learning objective. Wonderful. I hope that was helpful just to define what rapid e-learning is all about. Now let's look at converting classroom to rapid e-learning. Again, Paulina, please help me administer this poll. Same system as before. Just let me know the options that you think are most correct or relevant to your case. So what do we have in the lead, Paulina?
Using authoring tools that publish to HTML5. The second option is
Mhm.
using only the content available.
Mhm.
Then goes using a linear process for development
Mhm.
and not needing those fussy learning objectives.
Okay, wonderful. I think we can close the poll out and I'll talk through the options that we have chosen. Thank you,
Okay,
Paulina.
so let me close it and share the results. All right.
Okay.
Okay, so let me hide the poll back.
Thank you. Awesome. So thank you again, Paulina, for helping me administer that. I think most of us have gravitated towards the authoring tools option, but I think we also have, in doing that, overlooked one of the most important options, which is not needing those fussy learning objectives. So again, it ties back into what you're trying to train on, and you really need to question yourself as, is this really my training objective here? Can I sort of pare down on what I'm trying to train them on? Can I get this? Can I still get the same performance out of my learners by cutting down on the learning objectives? So those are some of the questions that we would need to ask ourselves. Using only the content available may be true, but in some cases we would probably need to expand our selection of content. Maybe not what we have available is enough to help us develop that, that e-learning course. So we would probably need to look at other sources like brochures, product descriptions, things like that, depending on the training you're trying to do. Linear development processes, I would say the time for linear processes is over. We actually are looking for more iterative, agile processes to help us really get that product in front of your internal or external clients quickly and getting their feedback on it in a pretty early stage, rather than going ahead and developing the full course and then sending it over and then getting a lot of rework requests. So we are trying to get these courses in front of our stakeholders very quickly. That is why the process is not as linear as it used to be. All right, let me just move on. So how is classroom to e-learning? How is it actually done? So your learning objectives need to be grounded in business results. So that is the first objective here. I'll also talk about this in a flowchart that I have in a subsequent slide. But then we also are looking at content, right? We are looking at the content, what we have available. We're really looking at it through a fine-tooth comb and seeing, is this content really what will enable me to train my specific learning objectives? If not, it's just a nice to have, it's not a need to have, so I can do away with it when I put together this rapid e-learning course. So those kind of decisions you need to be really black and white on. Again, authoring tools are your best friend. So use the right authoring tool for the need that gives you flexibility. For example, you can just publish a PowerPoint to e-learning using iSpring. So that is a quick and easy example of using an authoring tool to achieve e-learning quickly. And an iterative design and development process that I spoke about gets your courses in front of your stakeholders faster. It's not that they need to wait till the end of the entire development before they actually go ahead and put those courses and approve those courses for you. So this, I think, is a helpful case study that goes into what exactly we mean by looking at organization results, business results to help us drive our learning objectives. So in this case, our client was a contract research organization. So a pretty large company. I think it has around 60 to 70,000 employees globally. And at this time, when they came to us with this requirement, they had made some major acquisitions. So this company historically grew by acquisition in precedence to organic growth. They try to acquire companies that make sense in their larger portfolio of their offerings. So they acquired a few companies, and now they needed to onboard these new employees to their existing systems ASAP. So the desired organization result was getting the company to productivity as soon as possible. And then that just translated down into having each employee being productive within the existing framework of the acquiring company. So this covered multiple roles and departments. So we really needed to go in depth to what each of those training objectives needed to be for each of those audiences. Once we had the desired performance down is when we looked at the objectives for each of those training audiences. So we worked with SMEs from each department. We just sort of worked with them individually. We identified the training needs, where they are right now, where the audience needs to get to be productive. And then we categorized that based on the existing content that we had. And eventually, after that, we developed training that covered many different aspects of the learning journey. So before the training, we had e-learning, we had classroom sessions that were done, and we had performance support afterwards. So we didn't really use a one-size-fits-all e-learning strategy, but then we were really intentional in how we sort of designated what goes into what format and having a streamlined approach as to not replicate the content across different learning formats. So to give you an idea of the scale, this is what the scale looked like. We had 18 people working on it, overall 1,200 development hours. And finally, these courses were made compatible for the PC, laptop, and tablet. So Looking at the best practices, again, I want to drill back to this one. It is just that important. In the handout that we'll be sharing with you, this would be there as well, so you don't need to make any notes right now. But ensure that everything flows from organization results when you're putting your training together. It will really help you decide what content is important, what learning objectives are important, and what are not, and then make those decisions as to what finally goes into the training and what does not need to be in your training. Working with SMEs again is a challenge that many of our clients talk about. So we have given them a framework of how to make the best of your SMEs time without really overburdening them with requests time and time again. So this is how we've done it for one of our clients, where we suggested a format like this. So the SME creates a quick and dirty PowerPoint deck, so maybe 6 to 10 slides. They just record themselves talking through that deck, walking over that deck and recording their voice. Then that whole deck and audio is sent to us, right? So then we sort of transcribe the whole thing. We try to understand what the SME is trying to say, what the learning objectives are, and we really reuse a lot of that content. We reword it, we put it in the right presentation pattern to make it good for self-paced learning. And then they just end up reviewing just once, and the deliverable is good to go. So we've sort of cut down the development time for e-learning, I think, to a week or 2 weeks just by doing this process. Again, this is more I think useful for e-learning that is less than 20 minutes. Once we start going into 30-minute territory, I think this system may need to be looked at, and you may have to add 1 or 2 more review steps in between here. Now, we did say Rapid is all about putting function first and then form second. Again, but that does not mean your courses need to be ugly in any sense. There are ways to look at, am I hitting all the right notes design-wise, from a user experience-wise, and then ensure that you're doing that for your course. So then it is useful, but it's also good and easy on the eyes, and people would like to take it. So on that note, there are a few things that you can keep in mind. The first would be new age learning strategies. So this would be things like infusing meaning into your course, empathizing with your learners in the course, and the way you create that content, way you tie that whole narrative together. And then when it is possible, trying to create a story around your content so that we as human beings respond better to stories than just static information being thrown at us. So things like that, not so hard to do, not huge production costs for us, but then little intentionality in our design goes a long way. Blended learning is also good. So when you're looking at how you can take your classroom and repurpose it, you have a lot of options at your disposal, not just traditional e-learning. You also have microlearning and other learning formats that you can look at to make your learning effective and at the time more friendly for your learners as well. We would also, I guess, suggest that you work with a tool that gives you a lot of different formats to produce in. So we wouldn't recommend that you work with only one tool throughout. You probably need to access a suite of tools to help you achieve different learning formats, because learners learn differently. I don't think every single person learns the exact same way. So in many cases, you want to give people at least 2 different options to learn. You don't need to replicate the content, really. You don't need to duplicate it. But then again, you can see which content is best taught in which format, depending on when it would be most useful to that person. So if something is more useful at the point of need when they're doing that job, then something light like a PDF or a job aid may be sufficient. You don't need to do an e-learning course for that. If something that it is completely new to that person, then yeah, then I would say e-learning may be a good comprehensive training approach to do for that specific need. And finally, standardizing and scaling up. So before you do that, ensure you hit the right notes on these 5 areas. So first would be your style guide, deciding how you want the course to look, how the interactivities should look, what the graphics should follow. We then look at what authoring tool you're using, try to see what that tool gives you in terms of options. We finally see what the user interface should look like, how the navigation should work. We should, again, at this point, I would like to recommend that don't try to restrict navigation. Don't try to force your learners to go through each and every slide. Give them free navigation and then ensure that learning is done when you check them on the quiz in the final end of the course. So that is the way you do it. Interactivities, you're looking at them as well, trying to decide what interactivities you want to choose in the whole curriculum beforehand before you start putting those courses together. And use a an iterative and agile development process as opposed to a linear process that does not allow for feedback in the interim stages. So these are the 5, I would say, tenets of how you could scale up quickly. Good. I hope that wasn't too much information too fast. I know the handout actually has this again, so please feel free to look at it after this training, after this webinar. But at this time, we are going to jump into rebuilding your Flash or old courses into HTML5. And I believe Paulina is helping me administer this poll as well. So what is your opinion on how or what are the constraints that you need to keep in mind when converting an older Flash version of a course into HTML5?
All right. So far
How are
we
we doing?
have, yeah, the leading answer is doesn't require instructional design skills,
Mhm.
then cannot be done without source files. The third place takes a technically complicated and a difficult process. And the last one is can only be treated one way.
Okay, thank you for choosing these options. And again, I want to apologize in advance because I think we've been a little too clever with these options because all of them are not entirely correct. So I'll talk about all of them in a little detail. But if you want, Paulina, you can share the results and then we can get back to the presentation.
All right. So right now you guys can see what you have chosen as well as your peers. And I will hide the results and pass the mic back to Tarun.
Thank you. So a lot of us did choose the doesn't require instructional design skills. I would say that may be true in some aspects if you are not really looking to change the content a lot. But in most cases, when courses were created in Flash and older authoring tools, the interactivities were really different, right? And a lot of those interactivities would not really work on, let's say, smartphones today. So you are going to have someone with some instructional design background to come in and tell you, okay, this interactivity in your old course was trying to achieve this outcome, and for mobile phones, we can repurpose it in this way. So you're going to have someone, who's going to need to come in and inform you or advise you on those aspects as well. Again, cannot be done without source files. It is not true. You can sort of do that without source files, and we'll talk about how you can do that. It's a technically complicated. It's not easy, but then again, there are straightforward paths. There are decision-making processes that help us decide what is the strategy, what is the process that we can use. And after that point, it's just getting the work done. So it's not complex in that sense of the word. And obviously, there are many ways to do it. So we'll talk about those in detail. Before I talk about the decision-making process as to how you start to, apply certain strategies for your rebuilding or conversion strategy, let's look at the overall process, right? So this is what we would recommend for our clients. First is you would need to gather all your resources. So assuming you have courses created in Flash and other, authoring tools, you would first need to gather them. Just go across all your LMS or LMSs and look at what those courses are. You would then look at, do I have the source file available or not? What tool was this created in? Do I have that tool again, or should I really do it in another tool? That's when you start to organize courses and start to think through the input material that you have to work with and help that inform and guide your strategy going forward. We would then need to start identifying and evaluating the courses that we have. So maybe not everything needs to be converted, right? Maybe you have a few courses that you've identified that need conversion, but then you realize that nobody has accessed those courses for the past 3 or 5 years. Then you got to start to think, really, if nobody's accessed it, maybe the content is not relevant anymore. Maybe it's not useful anymore. So just because it's in Flash doesn't mean you need to convert it. You can take a decision on whether people are using it or not and help that to inform your decision making process. Finally, you would then prioritize the courses. So maybe then you come up with a list of courses that are really, really important. Maybe you have a few courses that are being taken daily. Maybe you have courses that are being taken by a lot of employees in your company. Those are the courses I think you should prioritize and have them done for Flash conversion ASAP, rebuilding into HTML5. And finally, we would then go into what strategy are we using for this. And this is something that I'm going to talk in detail in my next slide. And in most cases, if you have over, I would say 20, 30, maybe even 100, we've had clients come to us with more than 1,000 courses. So that is when you would start probably looking for outside help, because if you start taking on it on your own self, you're not going to get it done before 2020 ends. And that is the deadline that Adobe has put on top of our heads just to get these flash courses out of the way and pave the way for HTML5. So just to give you an idea of the scale, this was from a recent project that we did. Again, the deliverables were 1,500 courses, rebuilt from Flash into a newer authoring tools. It took 45,000 plus man hours. It took 30 developers, 3 leads, and 2 project managers. But by the end, we had these courses compatible for all the devices that our client was interested in for having their Salesforce use. And they were really, really happy because a lot of training content we were able to repurpose quickly and not have SMEs spend any more time on giving us new content. So this was a huge success for this company. And it is a company that all of us, I think, at least in the US, would be familiar with. It is the leader in the telecom sector. All right. So now let's go into the thick of things. This is the actual, I guess, strategy flowchart that we would follow as to what conversion or rebuilding strategy that we are going to use for our Flash courses. So the first thing that is going to inform your decision is, do your Flash courses have current and relevant content, right? The moment you say yes, you go to the left because these are your important courses. Then you go to this decision box that asks you, do you have the source files? If you do have the source files and you know what tool you want to create it in, you can just open it up in that tool and quickly republish to HTML5. This is probably the easiest and the most straightforward way. And a vendor wouldn't really need to come in and help you do this because it's pretty straightforward. But if you don't have the source files, here's where things get a little interesting, I would say. You would then start to see, okay, what can I reuse from my old assets and reuse them in a way that I can still reduce my effort for development. You start to look at, do I have media elements like videos? Do I have images that I can reuse? Great. So put them together in PowerPoint, and publish it to iSpring, publish an HTML5 course. It's as easy as that. If your courses were just really click-through page turners, then you could think of just recording the same thing and having that published as an MP4 video because it does not have any interaction at all. So these are some options that you can use if you, have relevant and current content in your courses. If your content is not relevant, then we come to the right side of this flowchart here. We would then need to see what strategies we would need to follow, and then we have 2 available. So if the content updates are not too extensive, we can just quickly rebuild them using the new authoring tool. So you would just change the content that needs to be changed, maybe touch base with your SME just once before you actually start building this out, get their approval on the relevant content, and then build that out. For courses that have content that is really not relevant, a lot, maybe 80-90% of it is not relevant, at that point you're almost rebuilding, redesigning a course from scratch. So you are going to use some content, you are going to use the same flow, but then the content that goes into that flow you would need your SMEs to help you with. And at that time I would say, you try to streamline your SME time so that you can get the most out of their time that they're devoting to you. So again, we have different strategies depending on whether we have the source files, whether the content is current or not, and then having these questions inform the strategy that best makes sense for us at the end of the day. Okay, wonderful. So this is our final poll for today, and this is going to be about translation. So Paulina, again, go ahead and administer this poll. Which of the following statements are true when it comes to translations? Go ahead and choose your options, please.
So the first place takes the last one. Translators can also narrate audio.
Okay.
The second place is the more you translate, the less your cost.
Okay, that's interesting.
The next one would be images and pictures are not translated. And
Mhm.
the last is translation and localization are same.
Okay, wonderful. So go ahead and display those results quickly, and then I'll talk to the options.
And let me close this poll and share the results with everybody so you too guys can see which options are the most popular ones. All right, so let me
Good.
hide it and pass the mic back to you, Tarun.
Thank you, Paulina. So I think a lot of us did not choose translation and localization are the same, and that's absolutely correct. Localization is more about how this content makes sense in the whole cultural aspect of that country or that locality you're translating to. But the other options are a little bit, I think, nuanced again. Translators can also narrate audio. Yeah, so you have people, you have native speakers in our translation partners who can narrate that audio for you. That is absolutely correct. The more you translate, the less your cost. It may not necessarily be true. So you also have to think of opportunity cost, right? So if you're looking for your own SMEs within the company to help you translate, that really takes a lot of out of their time because that is not their full-time job, and maybe they're missing out on something more important that they should be doing for the company. So I would not really jump to a conclusion that always translating internally is the right answer. It is on a case-by-case basis. Images and pictures are not translated. Yeah, there are ways to sort of, coming from the industry ourselves, we have recommendations that, when you are looking to translate a course, please make sure you don't have any text overlaying the images, because when that gets into translations, that's going to be a big issue. So we try not to overlay any text so that we can reuse the images. But then if there is text overlaid and that has to be translated, end of the day, that image is going to have to be recreated, and that's just going to add to your development cost. Wonderful. So this is the overall translation process that we follow. Again, for Rapid, it makes sense again, but then just because Rapid is more about the here and the now, I want to caution you that it is also about the long term, right? You're also trying to build your systems in a way that over a long period of time, everything starts to become a little more rapidized in the way you do things and a little more efficient. So this process is exactly that. So I'm pretty sure everyone would agree that the first step would need to be what needs translation. You start to identify that. You would also then start to see who your language experts need to be. So in some cases, it may not be the same person, right? You're not going to have a SME who is also a language expert, who is also expert on the content. They may be two different people. So you would need to sort of get your bases aligned with them and let them know that, we are putting this translated course together. We would need, your review on the content phase, and we would need the other person's review on the translated phase. And that's how you get their buy-in. And hopefully by that time, you have certain dates that you can hand out to them just to, lock in their availability. We then move to step 3, which is the translation, editing, and proofreading process. So this is a 3-step process that we follow in translations, where the quality is really baked into the process and we really minimize the amount of quality issues that can appear. The way it works is one person, one language expert translates it, and then another person who is also an expert edits it. So if they find any issues there from the localization aspect as well, here is where they would be addressed. And finally, a third person who may or may not be a subject matter expert, but is definitely a language expert, proofreads the whole script and the whole course for any errors that got lost in translation and anything like that that needs to be addressed. So by the end of it, you really have quality baked in, and that is when you can be confident that your script is staying true to your initial content, which was in English or maybe another language. At this point, it is good to then start approaching your professional narration experts to have them record your voiceover. And then before you deploy the course, before you get done with your project, we would also recommend that, I think most of us do it, is to maintain a translation memory. When you are starting out translating a certain topic or a certain content that was not done before, you are going to come across a lot of terminology that was not translated before, and then these translators are going to tell you what that terminology would be in each of those translated languages. So at that point, a translation memory tool would then allow you to store those translations in memory, saying, this term means this in this language, in Spanish, in Portuguese, whatever that may be. And for future subsequent courses, this tool is going to flag those translations automatically for you, and it would really reduce the amount of raw translation effort that would need to be expended going forward. So this is again a way that you look at your long term. You ensure that over a period of time, you're building more efficiencies, you're building more quality into the type of translations you're doing for all of your courses. End of the day, you're going to develop it and roll that out. And hopefully you've done such a great job that your learners are extremely happy with you. That is a great place to be in, but it happens sometimes for sure, and that is the best place to be. And we can be happy that we did a good job following all these process steps. So at this stage, I think we've covered most of what I wanted to talk about, and I know this topic may actually give rise to quite a few questions, I think. So I want to, before I jump into the questions, just inform you that we have put together a resource for you, not exactly related to this particular topic, but it relates to the overall, I think, high-level challenges that we are all facing due to COVID. So we are having our customers do a lot of virtual training, virtual classroom training. So the links to these, Paulina is going to send to you in an email that will be sent after the session. So keep your eye open for that. So that follow-up email will have links to these resources. So there is an ebook. There is also a full training course called Maximizing Virtual Classroom Impact. And this is something that we're offering at a huge discounted price. I think it will be of great interest for you. All right, so at this time, I want to open it up for questions. I hope what I've taken you through was helpful, but I'm pretty sure you have questions from your own use case that I'd be happy to answer for you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much, Tarun. Thank you for this presentation. And we do have a couple of questions. All right, and let's start with the first question from Donna. So she's curious, why would we want to move from PowerPoint to an authoring tool? I have only sent out PowerPoints as of now.
Right, so good question, Donna, and I think a lot of clients have struggled with the same question. The reason is PowerPoint in and of itself is not really a good tool for people to learn on their own. So PowerPoint slides are excellent if you have a presenter or a facilitator that is actually presenting and then ensuring all the questions that the audience has are being answered, is sort of contextualizing the content for them. So that is good in that use case. But then when you turn over to self-paced learning, there is a lot of back and forth that would need to happen with the training content. And here is where an authoring tool can help you build those interactivities, those knowledge checks, things that sort of make the learner interact with the course, from the learner to the course and not just from the course to the learner. So it becomes more bi-directional, and that really helps bake in the learning. So through a simple PowerPoint, I don't think we can do that. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you very much. And Marty is asking, translation aside, how do you view the value of audio narration versus visuals only? If valuable, do you recommend professional narration versus SMEs?
Again, great question, Marty. So audio narration versus visuals only, it really depends on, I would say, the type of content you're trying to train them on. Some topic areas may need some audio to help the students or learners understand what's going on. If it is really something that can be absorbed just by reading, we have a lot of courses that don't have audio, right? So some of our clients come to us with really simple topics that people can just read through at their own pace, and then that's it. We don't need to have audio for that. There are some courses I would say that need the audio to complement what's on screen. So if it is something that is, you're talking about charts and graphs and things like that, really need a person to walk a learner through something, that's when audio, I would say, makes more sense to that particular scenario. Just to give you an idea of the split between audio versus non-audio, I think 70 to 80% of the courses that we create do have audio in some form. 20% I would say do not. And that's again dictated by the need, the learner's familiarity with the content, the environment that they're learning in. For example, a lot of people are using just courses without audio, and that's for learners who are on the go. So if somebody's on the go, they're not really going to want to have the audio pipe up on their phones. They just want to read something. In that case, it's absolutely fine to do a course without audio as long as the information is structured very well. I hope that answers your question. And you also said, do you recommend professional narration versus SMEs? Yeah, I think in most cases, the cost benefit is there. If you use professional narrators, your quality of a narration will be really good. These professional voiceover artists have studios in which they record, so the quality is going to be really good, just the audio fidelity and quality. versus a SME who might just book a conference room, go in there and try to record it. You get sounds from every other environment that they're part of. So in that sense, it is, again, we would recommend that, but it's not a blanket recommendation. Again, you have to see what makes sense for your budget and for your use case.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Let's move on to the next question from Cassandra. As a beginner, what authoring tool would you recommend?
Oh, you can take that question, Paulina.
So, well, in this case, I would definitely recommend you to check out iSpring because it's a super easy to use and very user friendly. And plus, since it's based in PowerPoint, if you know how to use PowerPoint, you'll definitely know how to use iSpring. And I am actually citing our clients. This is what they say about our tool on all these websites where they can leave their testimonials. If you're interested to learn more about it, you can definitely send a message to support@ispring.com and our team will be more than happy to address it. And Robert has a question about ADA compatibility.
Mm-hmm.
So, teaching at a university, we are required to have our courses ADA compatible.
Mm-hmm.
Marking courses, Making courses exciting includes recommendations such as animations, games, videos, etc. Can
Mm-hmm.
these things be made ADA accessible, or should we limit ourselves to more straightforward presentations, for example, PowerPoint with audio?
Yeah, Robert, again, great question. A lot of our clients also struggle with the same thing. Again, it really is a balance. So obviously you cannot, to be honest, do everything that you could do in a non-ADA course as you can probably do in an ADA course, just because it's not possible to ensure compliance using a lot of the media-rich elements that are in use today, like games, videos, and things like that. That being said, there are ways to sort of approach that to make it more interactive. And at the end of the day, it's not really about the media elements themselves that make a course more engaging. It's about how you try to structure that content, almost the story. In fact, like I did mention story briefly. So the more easy and engaging you make the absorption of how the story flows, how the content flows, I think that will actually get your 80-20 in terms of engagement, and you can still be 100% ADA compliant. That being said, PPT and audio itself may not be a great self-paced learning tool. Again, you may want to lean on tools like iSpring to really help you build in some more interactions, some more, I would say, e-learning-ish interactivities that then sort of engage people on different platforms, and you can get the best of both worlds by doing that.
Thank you very much, Tarun, for covering it. And the next question is from Marian. It's a very specific one. You had mentioned that development time takes 1 to 2 weeks. Can you provide more details? For example, if you have a PowerPoint to convert, what's the start end point?
So it would be sort of similar to this process, right? So you're going to start with the PowerPoint deck. So that's your starting point. You could then have a person record their voice, or you could just have them write their script for each slide. Then you could go out to your partner and have that recorded, or you could do the recording in-house. You could sort of spruce up the slides. You can add some design interactivities. Leveraging a tool like iSpring, you can do that, and then you can just shoot it off for one round of review, maybe by week 2, mid of week 2, and by the end of week 2, you should have a course that is ready to go. Again, it is important that you would need to use tools that work within native PowerPoint, just like iSpring. I think iSpring really allows you that flexibility to really achieve this on a really tight timeline. You need to minimize, although you need to minimize the review times and review cycles. You can do that by getting their buy-in at the initial stage itself, getting really good sign off on those learning objectives, so there's no variation when it starts moving to development. Okay. I see a question from Karen here on how many slides does the
Mm-hmm.
presenter recommend as more ideal. It really depends, Karen. So nowadays we are seeing that people are their attention spans are starting to drop off after 15-20 minutes. Maybe that corresponds to a deck that is around 10 to 15 slides. Usually that is what we are seeing as well. So we try to counsel our clients not to exceed the 30-minute mark, because at that point it's really hard to hold their attention.
And Marian says, thank you for your answer. I was looking for an average time. Sometime the expectation is that it just takes a couple of days.
Yeah, those are, I would say, great expectations, quote unquote. Unfortunately, a lot of our stakeholders send something to us and they want something yesterday. So we know that struggle. I think on average, you can pull it off in a week if you want, really to have that quality in there. The more you try to accelerate something, you're going to have to let go of some of the more finer aspects of quality, obviously, and you know that. And maybe you have cost overruns that come into the picture when you try to accelerate things beyond their natural, how much they can be accelerated. So I would say 1 week is what you should sort of try to budget for yourself. But 2 days, that's cutting it a little too close.
Mm-hmm. All right, thank you. I think we've covered all the questions. Thank you very much, guys, for sending them.
Hmm.
And at this time, we really need to wrap up. I would like to thank you, Tarun, for covering this presentation, and we will see you at the next session. Bye,
Okay.
everybody, and bye, Tarun.
Thank you, Paulina. Thank you, everybody, for taking time today. It was great to present this for you. Thank you.